Hi, this is Irv Shapiro with the Dr. Vax channel, and today we're going to continue learning about FreeCAD, but specifically we're going to learn how to make multicolor signs with text. Now, in fact, we're going to really learn how to add text to a model. I've done a number of videos about making multicolor signs with text. In some of them I use Tinkercad. It's very, very easy to do. And so the first question I asked myself is, why bother with FreeCAD if Tinkercad is so easy? What we're going to learn is with FreeCAD, you have a lot of precision. You have a lot of flexibility about what you can do. And at first, it's going to seem a bit more complicated. But once you get the hang of it, it's really quite easy. So stay tuned and let's learn something together. This is another video on the Dr. Vax series, part of the Dr. Vax community. The Dr. Vax community consists of folks that are interested in using desktop technologies to make things. 3D printers, lasers, electronics, a little bit of programming, a bit of woodworking. If you want to hear about all of these videos as they become available, make sure you subscribe and click on the bell below. There's also a free discussion community at forum.drvax.com that has over 1,000 people that are actively engaging with each other and learning how to make things with desktop technologies. Now, today we're going to talk about FreeCAD. So the majority of this video is going to be a screen capture with a little picture of me in the bottom right-hand corner. I've added one new feature today that will show you right now. That feature is there's now a circle around a larger cursor. A number of viewers mentioned it was hard to follow the cursor, so I've made this easier. When I left click, you'll see a blue purplish dot. When I right click, you'll see a yellow dot. So that should make it a bit easier for you to follow the video. Now, this should not be your first FreeCAD video. There's a whole series linked above and also in the description of a bunch of videos you can watch to get started with FreeCAD. I will attempt to step you through this clearly, but I'm not going to cover every click because some of the concepts are taught in earlier videos. Now, before we start drawing, let's go through the steps we're going to cover. So if we look here, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a body, we're going to create a sketch, and we're going to extrude the base. Then we're going to create a shape string. A shape string is the text, what they call text, or text that you have the ability to manipulate as an object. It's really text almost as a sketch. We're going to move that shape string from a standalone entity into the body. We're going to learn about bounding boxes and how to use parameters of bounding boxes to center things. We're going to learn about the recompute option which will cause FreeCAD to recompute and redraw something. We're going to pad our shape string to give it dimensions. We're going to export it as an STL, and then we're going to show you how to slice it. So let's get started drawing. I'm going to select my Part Design Workbench, and you'll notice my toolbar's changed. Now, I've pointed this out to people before, but it's worth pointing out again. You may not see all of the icons because depending on how your toolbars are arranged, there may be icons off on the side. So just go to any place where you see the big dots and you can drag those around so that your icons look like my icons. Remember, you have to be on Part Design. Also, I'm using FreeCAD version 0.19, the latest release. I just downloaded the standard release from the FreeCAD website. We're going to start by creating an empty document. Then we're going to create a body. A body, once again, is a collection of sketches and transformations of those sketches that create something that some people might think of as a part. But a part is a different concept. A part, in essence, is a collection of bodies all together. So we're creating a body, and a body is a single, fully connected object. So this cup is a body, but if the handle was separate, it would be two bodies, because a body is always fully connected. Now we're going to create a sketch, and our sketch is our two-dimensional drawing that we're going to transform into a body. We're going to put that on the XY plane. You'll notice that went green here. I could also select that manually. So the XY plane, and click OK. Now we're going to center this around the origin, because that'll make centering the text easier. We can just center our text around the origin. I'm going to create an octagon. Octagon is just a regular polygon. So we're going to select the polygon object here. I'm going to hover over the origin until it turns white and drag out a polygon, and then left click a second time. So I dragged with the left click, I left clicked a second time, and then I'm going to right click to release that tool. Now, I don't want my text to be on an angle. I want it to be relative to a straight polygon. So how do I make the polygon straight? Well, if I select one of the lines in the polygon, and then I select the horizontal constraint, my polygon will now be straight. I can still resize it, but I can't rotate it because I have a constraint of horizontal here. Now, how do I decide the size? Well, I constrain it by selecting 2 points. I'll select this point here, and Command on a Mac, Control on a PC, a second point, and I'll put a horizontal constraint on it of 80 millimeters. I now have a diagram, a drawing, a sketch that is all green. That means it's fully constrained. You can see it says fully constrained here. I can close it. Now, you'll notice that there's a box around the outside. That's because in View, I have bounding box turned on. I just turned it off. That bounding box is going to be very, very important because a bounding box shows us the full dimension of an object. We're going to need that later on. I'm going to leave it off for right now. I'm going to go to Pad. You can go to that under Tasks or up here. And I'm going to make this 2 millimeters high. But I want it to be reversed. So I want it to be below my X, Y axis, which is really laying flat in my case. I want it below because I'm going to put the type on top. So I'm going to put the body below, the platform below, and the type on top. Click OK. And we are all done creating our base. Now let's create some type. Now, type is created in a different workbench. Workbenches are not different applications, really. They're different collections of tools, and those tools, for the most part, not completely, but for the most part, they share objects, they share geometries. As FreeCAD evolves, that sharing gets better and better and better. So we're going to go to a workbench called Draft. Draft is not because it's temporary, but because it's a workbench with tools for creating draftings or drawings of objects used in sort of, let's say, an architectural setting, things that are two-dimensional. One of the tools allows you to take type and create a string of type. So that tool is called the ShapeString tool. Very often, that tool will be off your screen. See how it's off the screen here? So I'm just going to move this back over here so I can see it. Or I could go to Tasks and you'd see ShapeString here, Shape from Text. Now, there's a bug. I don't know if it affects PCs, but I've noticed it on Mac a lot. If you have a Start page open, it sometimes switches that. I'm just going to close that Start page. So I'm going to do a Shape from Text. I'll just click on it up here. Now, you'll notice the X, Y, and Z are moving around. That's setting the point that I want to start my shape at. I'm going to just say Reset when I'm ready to start it because I want it to start at the origin. That's going to put the bottom left corner of the type at that point. What do I want to say? Well, we want to say Dr. Vax. And how high do I want the letters to be? Well, let's start them at, 10 millimeters seems fine. Now, what is this font file? FreeCAD does not have a concept of type really built into the draft workbench, or at least not a concept of three-dimensional type. Type is a sketch. So what it does is it uses standard computer font files in multiple formats, but you have to sort of, via trial and error, figure out which ones work. Now, where do you get those font files? Well, you can get those font files on your computer if you know where they're located. They're in a different place on Windows and Linux and Mac, and sometimes they move depending on the version and depending on how you signed in, how you started your user session on your computer in different places. I don't like to bother with that. I like to rather download fonts, and I found this site by watching another video. I apologize, I don't remember which video it was. But there's a wonderful site that we're going to go to now called thefonts.com. And at thefonts.com, there are hundreds, might be thousands of different fonts that you can choose from. So Lucky Boss looks good. And this has a characteristic we're interested in. See here it says free for personal use. You want to pick fonts that say either free or free for personal use, and then download those fonts to your computer. So you'll see here it downloaded a zip file. I'm in Microsoft's Edge browser. Interestingly enough, I use the Microsoft Edge browser on my Macs nowadays because I think it's actually quite a bit nicer in a number of ways than Chrome, and it seems quite fast. So it downloaded a zip file. I can double click on that on my Mac, and you'll see inside is a TTF file. I'm going to right click and copy that. And then I'm going to put that in a known location. I don't want to leave it in the download folder because I empty my download folder sometimes, and then if I go to work on a FreeCAD model again, I use that font, it'll be gone. So I'm going to put it in a directory where I keep all my fonts. Okay, I'm going to select that font now. And it is right here, and say open. And now I'm going to reset my point again so it starts at 0 because it moved when I was moving my cursor around. I'm going to click on OK. And we have Dr. Vax. Now, it's not in the right place. And it might be too big. So let's figure out how to fix all that. And, as importantly, it's flat. That's not going to work very well. So we need to pad it or extrude it, and we need to move it. Let's learn how to do that now. The first thing we want to do is we want to include it in the body that we're building. Right now, you'll notice here, it's a separate item. So we're going to drag that up to body. And now it's part of the body. If I didn't include that in the body, I couldn't manipulate it with the part design workbench I'm using to work with the body. So now I'm going to switch back to my part design workbench, go back to my model, select my shape string, and down here you'll see something called placement. You'll see something else called position. Now, I could take and just move it around, and because I want to move it to the left, remember I'm on the x-axis, and from the 0 it's like a number line. To the left is a negative, to the right is a positive. I can move it, let's say 10 millimeters, or I can move it 20 millimeters, or I can move it 25 millimeters. I can move it wherever I want. But there's a problem with doing that manually. And the problem is that if I resize the base, it'll still be centered, but it won't be the right size. So then I'm going to resize the type. And if I resize the type and I moved it manually, it's going to be off center. So I want to move it based on the size of the type. But if I look down here, the only thing I specify for the size of the type is the height. In a lot of videos I've watched about using ShapeStrings with FreeCAD, people take and measure it using the measuring tool, which you can see right up here. That works, but it still doesn't make it truly dynamic. So how do we make it truly dynamic? Remember that bounding box? Let's turn it back on. That box now surrounds the type. And because it's a component, a standard component of FreeCAD, it has parameters associated with them. So I did some Googling around, I did some research, and I found how to determine the size of the bounding box. So if we always move it to the left half the width of the bounding box and move it down half the height of the bounding box, it'll always be centered. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, how do I know what that parameter is? Well, if we look back here, we'll see that parameter is called bounding box X length. There's another parameter called bounding box Y length, and all of those apply to the current shape. So the formula we want to use to move it to the left is minus the current shape, bounding box X length divided by 2. So let's take and copy that. Let's go back to our drawing. Now, instead of having an absolute number, let's go to the formula option. Let's erase what's in there. Let's paste in our formula, the current shape, bounding box X length, and click OK. It didn't move, but if we tab out of the box, it will. So now it moved to the left. Now we need to move it down. So let's go to the y-axis. Let's change X length to Y length. OK. Tab down, and it moved down. But this type is a little too big for our sign. So we need to make it smaller. So let's make it 7 millimeters high. Tab down. It got smaller, but it's not centered anymore. What's wrong? Well, FreeCAD has an interesting optimization. It doesn't automatically recalculate every formula every time depending on the formulas in order to save compute cycles, to keep your application running fast. So what we need to do is go up here to our ShapeString, right-click on it, and say Recompute Object. Bam, moved into the right place. So that looks pretty interesting, except our type's still flat. So let's make sure our ShapeString is selected, and because we're in the Part Design Workbench, we can take and extrude it. Click on Pad. We're going to make it too high. And the pad, this time we're going in the positive direction. Remember last time we reversed it? So this is on top. Click OK. And we are all done. We have a three-dimensional coin here. We can see here. Ready to be printed. So how do we print it? Well, we select our body. we go to File, Export. We're going to select to export it as an STL file. And let's just call this Dr. Vax coin. Save. Now, there are a number of ways you can take an STL file and print it in two colors. The easiest way is just watch your printer. When it starts printing the very first layer of the text, that won't really matter, hit the pause button, change your filament, let it warm back up, hit the play button, hit the continue button, and you have a two-color print. In Cura, there's a script you can load. Scripts are add-ons you can load to set a pause at a particular place. And there's some videos on the channel about how to do that. If you're using Octoprint, Octoprint can pause at a layer. There's a video on the channel about how to do that. We're going to look at a third way, which is the way that I used to print these. I'm fortunate enough to have an IDEX printer, an independent dual extruded printer. In fact, I have two of them. And I'm going to show you how to print two color signs on an IDEX printer, specifically the IdeaMaker Artist D right now. I'm going to take and use a slicer called ImageMaker. So let's go ahead and open that up and see how we create a two-color print on a IdeaMaker Artist D IDEX printer. So I'm going to import a model, and the model I'm going to import is the Dr. Vax coin. And let's zoom in here so it makes it a little easier to see. And we'll rotate down a little bit. Now, I need to take that model, which is a single model, and make it into two models. How do I do that? I go to Free Cut. I select my model. I'm going to take and put a cut at 2.1 millimeters. Now, why 2.1 millimeters? Well, because if I do it at 2 millimeters, I might cut off the actual top layer a little bit. I want to be just above the top layer, so I want the type to stick well, so we'll have a little tiny bit of blue, in this case, underneath the white, but you really won't be able to see it. So I'm going to say Start Cut. So now I actually have two models. I have one model here and one model here. But both these models have problems now because I cut in the middle of the model. That means the triangles that were connecting them are now open. The geometry is open. That's called non-manifold. So let me select one of these at a time and click on Repair and say Auto Repair. Select the other one, Repair, Auto Repair. Now, I can take and click on View here, select my type, and say I want that to print with the right extruder. Select my base. I can say I want that to print with the left extruder. Now I can go ahead and start and slice this model. I'm going to use all the defaults. And it's telling me part of my model is not touching the print bed. Well, of course not, because it's the type on top. So do I want to add support structures? No. I can preview my model now. And there we have it. Now let's change it to Preview Extruder Color. And there you can see the base and the type, and a raft was turned on, which is why you're seeing that outline along the edges. Well, folks, I hope you learned something today. I learned a lot preparing this video. I learned about these extra parameters and bounding boxes and how you can use those to center things. By the way, that works for objects other than just type. Any body you have has a bounding box around it, and you can use it for centering and positioning purposes. So if you enjoyed this, subscribe to the channel, recommend this video to everyone you know, click on the bell so you're notified, go to forum.drvax.com to engage with other people about these videos and making things, and let's continue to learn things together.